What if I were to inform you that one of the most profound love stories in the Bible transcends mere romance? What if this narrative encompasses themes of loyalty that would render contemporary friendships pale in comparison? It is a tragedy that rivals the finest works of Shakespeare, coupled with a tale of redemption that anticipates the gospel itself. We kindly invite you to subscribe to our channel for more biblical insights. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are exploring what could be the most overlooked book in the Bible, the Book of Ruth. Now, I can almost hear your thoughts, Ruth. That brief book nestled between Judges and Samuel, the one we typically bypass on our journey to the thrilling tales of King David. Ruth is often neglected for a variety of reasons. First, it is brief, merely 4 chapters. Second, it lacks dramatic miracles like the parting of the Red Sea or the destruction of the walls of Jericho. Third, the story unfolds predominantly in fields and on threshing floors, which are not exactly the epic battlegrounds featured in other biblical accounts. However, this is precisely why we should focus on it. Sometimes, the most significant truths are discovered not in the spectacular but in the mundane. The story of Ruth unfolds within the everyday experiences of ordinary individuals confronting extraordinary trials, set during the time of the Judges, when Israel was engulfed in political and moral turmoil. This book shines as a beacon of hope and faithfulness. What makes it truly exceptional is its narrative brilliance, interlinking every essential theme found in the Bible. Within these 4 concise chapters, we observe divine providence at work through human decisions, redemption that encompasses both personal and universal aspects, the inclusion of outsiders into God's community, and a vital connection in the lineage leading to Jesus Christ himself. Most importantly, Ruth's narrative illustrates that no life is too insignificant for God to utilize, no person too alien for God to embrace, and no circumstance too desperate for God to redeem. In the next 30 minutes, we will delve into this extraordinary book, and I assure you that by the conclusion of this video, your perception of Ruth will be transformed. You will uncover why this seemingly simple love story is, in fact, one of the most intricate and significant narratives within Scripture. To fully appreciate Ruth's story, we need to rewind approximately 3,100 years, specifically around 1100 BCE, during what historians refer to as the period of the Judges in Israel. Imagine this: the esteemed leader Joshua has passed away, the Israelites have settled in the Promised Land, yet there is no central authority, no unified kingdom. Instead, we have a loose alliance of tribes, each striving to endure in a hostile setting. The Book of Judges states plainly, in those days there was no king in Israel, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. This era was marked by cycles of sin, oppression, cries for divine assistance, and deliverance through judges. However, our story does not commence with a formidable judge or a grand conflict. It begins with a famine in Bethlehem, a name that ironically signifies house of bread. Here's where it becomes intriguing. This was not merely a natural calamity, it held profound theological significance. In the covenant God established with Israel, famine often signified divine judgment. For Bethlehem, the breadbasket of Judah, to face a shortage of bread represented a crisis of both physical and spiritual magnitude. This famine compels the family at the center of our narrative to make a desperate decision, to abandon their homeland and journey to Moab, located about 50 miles east across the Dead Sea. Yet, it is crucial to comprehend the context regarding Moab. The Moabites and Israelites were not exactly friendly neighbors. The Moabites were descendants of Lot, resulting from an incestuous relationship, and their historical interactions with Israel were complicated. They denied Israel passage during the Exodus, hired Balaam to curse them, and their women led Israelite men into idolatry. There was no love lost between these two groups. The cultural tensions extend further. We are discussing a patriarchal society where women's security and status relied entirely on their male relatives. A woman without a husband or sons faced dire circumstances. This situation highlights one of the most vulnerable classes in ancient Israel, the widow. In this society, widows possessed limited rights and fewer choices. Without a male protector, they often confronted poverty, exploitation, and social isolation. Therefore, God's law explicitly commanded Israel to safeguard widows, along with orphans and foreigners. Unfortunately, these laws were not always adhered to. This is the environment into which Ruth enters, a world where being a widow was challenging enough, but being a foreign widow placed one at the lowest rung of the social ladder. Yet, it is this very backdrop that renders what follows so extraordinary. Women in ancient Israel typically operated within strict social confines. They drew water, prepared meals, crafted textiles, and assisted with harvesting, all under the protection and authority of their male relatives. A woman alone was vulnerable to exploitation or worse. Thus, when we read about Ruth venturing out to glean in the fields, we must grasp just how courageous and potentially perilous this action was. She was stepping beyond every social safety net her culture provided. This is the stage God selected for one of the most beautiful tales of redemption in Scripture, a time of moral chaos, a place of ethnic strife, and a social order seemingly stacked against our main characters. Yet, as we are about to discover, God was orchestrating events in ways no one could have foreseen. What if I told you that the Book of Ruth is not merely a lovely tale but a masterpiece of literary artistry? Let's unlock the literary treasures concealed within these 4 meticulously constructed chapters. The book's structure is nothing short of brilliant. Envision it as a perfectly balanced diamond with 4 facets. Each chapter is not just a continuation of the narrative, it represents a carefully crafted movement within a larger symphony. Chapter 1, titled The Loss, begins with death and emptiness, transitioning from Bethlehem to Moab and back, while introducing our central theme of hesed through Ruth's loyalty. Chapter 2, The Meeting, depicts divine providence guiding Ruth to Boaz's field, where the first hints of redemption emerge, and hope begins to dawn. Chapter 3, The Request, describes the midnight encounter at the threshing floor, where a bold plan meets an honorable response, blending ancient customs with personal choices. Chapter 4, The Redemption, involves legal proceedings at the city gate, culminating in marriage and birth, signifying a journey from emptiness to fullness. Now, let's discuss something intriguing, the Hebrew terms that convey the story's deeper significance. 3 key words illuminate the narrative. First, hesed, often translated as kindness or loyalty, encompasses much more. It signifies covenant faithfulness, a love that acts beyond mere obligation. We see this in Ruth's commitment to Naomi, in Boaz's protection of Ruth, and ultimately, it reflects God's unwavering love for his people. Second, Gal, meaning to redeem, appears 23 times in this brief text. It transcends the notion of merely reclaiming property. it pertains to restoring life itself. When Boaz becomes Ruth's Goel, or Redeemer, he participates in a divine pattern that points to a greater Redeemer. Third, shuv, meaning to return, is employed repeatedly, creating a powerful motif of restoration. Naomi returns to Bethlehem, and Ruth accompanies her, through whom blessings return to a family that seemed cursed. The author employs several sophisticated literary techniques that might elude us today but would have captivated ancient audiences. 1. A chiastic structure, where the narrative moves from fullness to emptiness and back to fullness, with each scene carefully balanced against its counterpart. 2. Dialogue mastery, over half the book consists of dialogue, with each character's speech revealing their essence, enriched by wordplay in double meanings. 3. Narrative gaps, the author intentionally leaves spaces for reflection. What was Ruth's life like in Moab? What truly transpired on the threshing floor? Perhaps most fascinating are the parallel stories woven throughout Ruth's tale. Ruth's journey echoes and contrasts with other biblical narratives. Like Abraham, she departs her homeland for an uncertain future. Like Tamar, she is a foreigner ensuring the continuation of the family line. Like Israel itself, she seeks refuge under God's wings. Each parallel adds layers of meaning to the story. The beauty of Ruth's literary structure serves the narrative's purpose flawlessly. Every word, every scene, and every parallel points to the overarching themes of redemption, providence, and hesed. This is not merely effective storytelling but divine inspiration working through human skill. Understanding these literary elements does not detract from the story's impact, rather, it enhances it. Like a masterful painting, the closer you examine it, the more beauty you uncover. Imagine losing everything: your home, your husband, your sons, your entire future. This encapsulates Naomi's story. We first encounter Naomi as a wife and mother compelled by famine to leave her hometown of Bethlehem. However, tragedy soon strikes. First, her husband Elimelech dies, then, after her sons marry Moabite women, both sons die as well. 10 years, 3 graves, and no grandchildren later, Naomi makes one of the most heart-wrenching declarations in Scripture. Upon returning to Bethlehem, she tells the townspeople, "Do not call me Naomi," which means pleasant, "call me Mara," meaning bitter, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. However, what renders Naomi's narrative so impactful is that it does not conclude in bitterness. In spite of her suffering, she evolves into something unexpected, a master strategist in God's plan for redemption. Observe how she steers Ruth through the customs of Israel. Every directive she provides is deliberate: when to approach Boaz, how to approach him, and what to say. This is not merely a sorrowing widow, this is a woman who comprehends precisely how redemption operates in Israel. Gradually, through Ruth's loyalty and Boaz's generosity, we witness Naomi's transformation. The woman who returned empty now leaves the story with a grandson in her arms, a child destined to become the grandfather of King David himself. Ultimately, the women of Bethlehem proclaim to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord who has not left you without a redeemer this day." The bitter waters of Mara have been sweetened once more. Naomi Pleasant has reclaimed her name, and perhaps this aspect of her story is the most compelling. Often, God's most significant redemption tales commence with our deepest losses. Where you go, I will go; where you lodge, I will lodge; your people shall be my people, and your God my God. These words, uttered by a young Moabite widow, resonate through history as one of the most profound declarations of loyalty ever recorded. Yet, let's grasp just how radical Ruth's decision truly was. Picture her as a young woman at a crossroads in her life. Behind her lies everything familiar, her homeland, her family, her gods, while ahead lies total uncertainty. As a Moabite, Ruth was not merely opting to follow her mother-in-law, she was choosing to become a stranger in a foreign land. Remember, Moabites were regarded as enemies of Israel and were barred from the assembly of the Lord for 10 generations. Yet, here she stands, selecting the unknown over the familiar, prioritizing loyalty over safety. Please kindly subscribe to our channel for more biblical insights. Observe how Ruth develops throughout the story, from gleaning leftover grain to becoming the owner of the field, from being labeled a Moabite to being included in Jesus' genealogy, from a widow with no future to the great-grandmother of King David. However, it is not only Ruth's journey that is remarkable, it is also the manner in which she navigates it. Consider the virtues she embodies: loyalty, as she steadfastly refuses to abandon Naomi; initiative, as she ventures out to work in the fields; wisdom, as she perfectly adheres to Naomi's guidance; courage, as she approaches Boaz at the threshing floor; and humility, as she requests rather than demands. Ruth exemplifies what theologians refer to as a true convert, not merely someone who changes religions, but one who experiences a complete transformation of identity and allegiance. And here lies the beautiful irony: this foreigner becomes crucial to Israel's royal lineage and ultimately to the lineage of the Messiah himself. From Ruth, we learn that genuine faith is not about one's origins but about one's direction, that true loyalty entails betting your entire future on bonds of love, and that sometimes the most profound acts of faith resemble ordinary choices made with extraordinary courage. In a narrative filled with remarkable women, Boaz emerges as a figure who redefines true righteousness. He is not simply a wealthy landowner. He is what the Hebrew Bible designates as a Goel, a kinsman redeemer. Now, let's clarify this important concept. A kinsman redeemer is a close relative with the legal right and obligation to act on behalf of a family member in distress. They could reclaim lost property, free relatives from servitude, preserve the family name, and provide for widows. Yet, what makes Boaz exceptional is not just his actions but the manner in which he executes them. Observe his initial interaction with Ruth. He does not merely allow her to glean, he exceeds the legal expectations. First, he guarantees her safety, instructing her to stay close to his young women. Second, he offers extra protection, commanding the young men not to lay a hand on her. Third, he provides additional provisions, telling her to drink from the vessels when she is thirsty. This is a man who comprehends that true righteousness transcends mere rule following, it embodies reflecting God's heart. Notice how he addresses Ruth, a foreign widow: "The Lord repay you for what you have done." He recognizes her, values her, and publicly acknowledges her virtue. However, perhaps Boaz's most commendable moment occurs at the city gate, where another redeemer with a prior claim to Ruth exists. Boaz could have stepped aside and would have been legally justified in doing so. Instead, he navigates the situation with wisdom and integrity, ensuring that both the letter and the spirit of the law are honored. In Boaz, we witness leadership characterized by protection without condescension, generosity without seeking recognition, and justice tempered with kindness. righteousness that transcends mere regulations. He becomes a foreshadowing of what theologians would later identify as a type of Christ, the ultimate kinsman redeemer who goes far beyond legal obligations to save his people. A word in Hebrew recurs throughout the book of Ruth, a term so rich in meaning that English translations struggle to convey its essence. That word is hesed. We often translate hesed as kindness or loving kindness, but it encompasses so much more. Imagine love, loyalty, mercy, and faithfulness intricately woven together. It is covenant love in action, extending beyond duty, persisting when circumstances seem hopeless. The book of Ruth is imbued with hesed, appearing like golden threads in a tapestry. Let's observe it unfold. First, we witness it in Ruth's declaration to Naomi, "Where you go, I will go." She could have returned to her family and rebuilt her life. Instead, she opts for a path of sacrificial love. Then, we see it in Boaz's response to Ruth, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law has been fully told to me." He recognizes and honors her hesed with his own extraordinary acts of kindness. Finally, we witness it in Naomi's transformation, moving from bitter emptiness to joyful fullness, all through the hesed of others. However, this ancient concept collides with our modern world. Hesed is not merely a beautiful notion from the past, it represents a radical way of living that challenges us today. Consider this: when was the last time you witnessed someone choosing loyalty over convenience? What would it look like to go beyond mere obligation in your relationships? How might hesed transform your community in a world marked by disposable relationships and casual commitments? Hesed urges us towards something deeper, to love when it costs us something, to remain faithful when walking away would be simpler, and to show kindness that exceeds expectations. Please kindly subscribe to our channel for more biblical insights. The beauty of hesed reflects God's own character. Just as he remains faithful to his promises and his love endures forever, we are invited to practice this same transformative love in our own lives. What does redemption signify in the book of Ruth? It is not merely a spiritual concept, it unfolds as a beautiful tapestry of personal, national, and prophetic restoration. Let's begin with the personal redemption stories interwoven throughout this narrative. Naomi's redemption from, "I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty," to holding her grandson, surrounded by women declaring, "Blessed be the Lord." From Mara, bitter, back to Naomi, pleasant. Ruth's redemption progresses from a widowed foreigner gleaning leftovers to a respected wife and mother in Israel, from Moabite outsider to the great-grandmother of King David. Boaz's redemption evolves from a wealthy yet likely unmarried older man to a husband and father, becoming a vital link in God's redemptive plan. Yet this intimate family story resonates beyond its immediate context. Remember, this narrative unfolds during the time of the Judges, one of Israel's darkest epochs, a period of moral chaos without a king in Israel, where everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Yet, amid this darkness, we witness foreign nations being integrated into Israel, showcasing God's fidelity to his covenant promises and paving the way for Israel's golden age under David. Here is where the story takes a remarkable turn. This is not merely about one family's restoration, it points to something far grander. First, the lineage of David, Ruth and Boaz's son, Obed, becomes David's grandfather, and the tale concludes with David's genealogy. Second, the promise of the Messiah, a foreign woman enters the royal lineage, and Bethlehem regains its significance as the kinsman-redeemer pattern foreshadows Christ. Third, the inclusion of nations. Ruth the Moabite becomes part of God's people, foreshadowing the Gentiles' inclusion in God's family. This represents redemption in its most complete form, personal suffering transformed into purpose, national renewal achieved through individual faithfulness, and God's global plan of salvation unfolding through everyday lives. Perhaps the most beautiful aspect of Ruth's redemption narrative is that it reminds us our personal redemption stories are never solely about ourselves, they are part of God's larger narrative of restoring all things. As it happened, she arrived at the field belonging to Boaz. This simple statement in Ruth 2 verse 3 may be one of the greatest understatements in Scripture because what seems like coincidence is, in reality, divine orchestration at its finest. Let's examine the coincidences in Ruth's journey. A famine compels a family to Moab. Ruth fortuitously marries into this Israelite family. She chooses Israel over Moab. She happens to glean in Boaz's field. Boaz turns out to be a kinsman redeemer. He is also a man of noble character. None of these occurrences are mere accidents. Transitioning to a timeline graphic, observe how God transforms famine into abundance. The first scene depicts a famine in the land, while the final scene reveals that she bore a son. Between these two moments, we witness empty hands filled with grain, empty hearts filled with love, and empty wombs filled with life. What makes Ruth's story so compelling is that God does not appear in a burning bush, there are no seas parting, nor angels proclaiming messages. Instead, we observe divine providence at work through a mother-in-law's guidance, a farmer's generosity, and a midnight conversation involving a legal transaction. This is providence in action, God orchestrating redemption through ordinary individuals making choices, daily acts of kindness, simple expressions of faith, and routine business dealings. Like a master weaver, God intertwines all these threads, personal choices, cultural customs, perfect timing, and human faithfulness, creating a tapestry more beautiful than anyone could have envisioned. Please kindly subscribe to our channel for more biblical insights. Here lies our hope, just as God worked through the apparent coincidences in Ruth's life, He is working in ours. When we cannot see His hand, we can trust His heart. When life appears random, He is crafting a narrative. When circumstances seem meaningless, He is moving towards redemption, from famine to fullness, from emptiness to abundance, from chance encounters to divine appointments. This is the God who operates in the ordinary to achieve the extraordinary. What begins as a widow's journey home evolves into one of the most theologically significant narratives in Scripture. The book of Ruth resembles a seed that develops into a mighty tree, with branches extending into the very core of God's redemptive plan. Let's explore the Davidic connection. The book concludes with a genealogy that appears almost surprising until you recognize its profound significance: Boaz, Obed, Jesse, David. This is not merely a family tree, it represents the royal lineage of Israel. Through Ruth's faithfulness, a Moabite widow becomes the great-grandmother of Israel's greatest king. However, the significance runs even deeper, with staggering messianic implications. Consider these parallels. First, Bethlehem's role. Ruth's story is centered in Bethlehem, where David will be born, and ultimately Jesus will also be born in this same town. Second, the kinsman-redeemer pattern. Boaz is the kinsman-redeemer who pays a price, takes a Gentile bride, restores an inheritance, and provides an heir. All of these foreshadow Christ's redemptive work in the grand narrative of salvation history. Ruth occupies a vital position. She bridges the period of judges to the era of kings, introduces Gentile blood into the messianic line, and demonstrates God's universal plan of redemption, showing how individual faithfulness connects to cosmic purposes. Perhaps one of the most revolutionary aspects of Ruth's story is its model for Gentile inclusion during a time when ethnic boundaries were rigid. Ruth illustrates that faith, not ethnicity, determines belonging. Outsiders can become insiders through covenant loyalty. God's family transcends national borders, and divine blessings flow through unexpected channels. This theme of inclusion resonates throughout Scripture: Isaiah's vision of all nations streaming to God's mountain, Jesus' ministry to Gentiles, Paul's teachings about the inclusion of Gentiles, and John's vision of every tribe and tongue worshiping together. Ruth's story anticipates it all. The theological richness continues in the portrayal of divine providence, God working through ordinary circumstances, sovereign guidance without miraculous intervention, personal choices carrying cosmic significance, covenant faithfulness, and human hesed reflecting divine hesed. Promises are upheld despite difficult situations, and faith is expressed through practical actions. Consider how this brief book connects to major biblical themes: election and inclusion, faith and works, law and grace, divine and human activity, individual and corporate salvation. Ultimately, Ruth's theological significance lies in its revelation of God's heart for the nations, the integration of human and divine activity, the cosmic importance of personal faithfulness, and the foreshadowing of Christ's redemptive work. This simple love story turns out to be a pivotal chapter in God's redemptive plan, demonstrating that no life is too ordinary, no background too foreign, and no situation too hopeless for God to employ in His divine purpose. What relevance does a 3,000-year-old story about a widow and her mother-in-law hold for us today? As it turns out, everything. In a world characterized by ghosting and casual commitments, Ruth's loyalty appears almost radical. Imagine sharing her words on social media: "Where you go, I will go, where you stay, I will stay, your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." In an era of easy abandonment, this is what unshakable loyalty embodies. Let's bring Ruth into our contemporary context. Modern loyalty manifests as remaining with aging parents despite career opportunities elsewhere, supporting friends through mental health challenges, committing to a community when relocation would be simpler, and choosing difficult relationships over comfortable isolation. In our increasingly divided world, Ruth and Boaz's cross-cultural relationships speak volumes. A Moabite and an Israelite. Differing religions, social classes, and life experiences, yet they build bridges rather than walls. They demonstrate how to overcome prejudices, value character over background, create family across cultural divides, and foster inclusive communities. Ruth understands economic hardship; she has experienced it. She faced cultural adjustment and starting over, and she lived through uncertainty. Her story reminds us that hope is not defined by circumstances but by choices. Perhaps the most encouraging aspect of Ruth's journey is its ordinariness. There are no miraculous interventions, no dramatic visions, and no burning bushes, just ordinary people making faithful choices in everyday moments. This signifies that your ordinary life holds value. The daily decision to be kind, the choice to remain faithful, the small act of generosity, and the moment of integrity, these are not merely good deeds, they contribute to a larger narrative. Ruth teaches us that every act of kindness matters, every choice to remain faithful counts, every bridge we construct makes a difference, and every ordinary day possesses extraordinary potential because, like Ruth, we never know how our daily choices might be part of a larger story that extends well beyond what we can perceive. Please kindly subscribe to our channel for more biblical insights.